Capsuleers, and welcome back to my channel. Alan is here for another fitting guide, and today we are going to take a look at the MALLER or whatever you want to call it, of course from an alpha clone perspective and with all the limitation that goes along with it in terms of skills. The MALLER is most likely the best laser-based cruiser that you can get as an alpha clone, and it is quite a sturdy ship and will give you plenty of opportunities to complete tier 6, tier 7 encounters with little or no pain in there. It's also very versatile, and we will see in the overall ship overview and feelings that you can go either with a brawler build or with a range build with absolutely no issue at all. So if we move to the actual ship's detail, you see that the appearance is very iconic. For me, that sort of shape and the sort of heads that you have reminds me of that Star Wars side movie when you have that Corvette destroyer size ship moving and ramming full speed into the Imperial Star Destroyers to breach out the planetary shield system that was in place. And that's the image that I still have in my mind when I look at the ship. But this is something that I really enjoyed. The shape of the ship and the look of it is one of the best Armor ships so far that I've had the chance to fly. In terms of overall trait description, so instantly you recognize that this is sort of a tank and an armor tank. You get from armor operation bonus a 4% armor resistance per level, so fully trained that's a 20% bonus, which basically gives you the equivalent of an armor harness or a red one for free, and that what makes the ship quite sturdy in terms of armor tanking, because it will boost your natural resistance, and you will see that they are quite good from the base anyway. In terms of cruiser command bonus, so that will impact your overall DPS and the way the medium lasers, which should be your main weapon anyway, so you get a flat 5% per level, so 25% damage. But most importantly, you get a 50% reduction in your medium laser capacity need for whatever you want to shoot them. And that is very important in terms of cap management and maintaining that ship capacitors stable. In terms of attribute, you see here that you have something quite sturdy with a base defense of almost 3.5k, a bit over 3.5k actually, with the majority of it being in armor, 4.3k sorry, in armor, with base resistance, which are quite interesting. You see that you already have a 20% resistance into explosive, and then of course you have like 3k in shields, so a bit less, which is natural for Armor ships, which are more armor tank, and 3.5k in structure, which make up from your last sort of resistance ditch when you will go there. Capacitor wise, you get a 3.25k, a bit over that, which is plenty enough to manage your ship. And the power grid output is a bit above 800 megawatts standard, which again give you plenty of room to actually fit whatever you like in terms of modules. When we look at the overall ship layout, so you see that you have 1 drone, 4 high slot, 2 medium, 5 lows, and this is where the flexibility will lie, because you have 5 lows. It means that you can arrange your ship depending on what you intend to face or what approach you want to take to combat, being more of a brawler build or a range kiting build, because this ship can actually do both very efficiently. And as for the internal, you get 2 of the weapon rigs and 2 of the engineering rigs, which will help you boost a bit your DPS or natural defenses, and get a bit help in terms of capacity management as well. As for the rest, it's fairly standard. Your flight velocity is 262, which is a bit faster than what you get with the Omen, and which can be still improved with your cruiser skill. So if you max out your cruiser skill, your speed will increase, your inertia will be better as well, so that the ship will handle better, and you will get much more damage out of your laser, which will cost you less in terms of capacity management. So already you have understood that cruiser piloting skill will be one of the key assets that you want to have as soon as possible if you want to fly this ship. So when we look at the fittings, basically, as I said, you have 2 options to outfit the ship. You can go for pulse lasers and go for brawling build, or you can go for beam lasers and have more range and get more of a kiting build in there. I won't go into the detail of the brawler build, because basically I'm gonna do very soon, most likely next week, a video on the MOA, which is the sister ship shield tank, but with the railgun system. And with the railgun system, the situation is a bit opposite, because the range is not so good on the rifle as compared to the beam lasers, but the damage output on the subnose is very substantial, and so you tend to have a ship which is much more oriented to a brawler. And so you can take out the fittings from the MALLER and adapt it to from the MOA and adapt it to the MALLER, and you will have your standard brawler build very easily and very straightforward. So as I said, went for a kiting build. So of course we're talking beam lasers. You can see here I went for the first grade of officer gear, meaning that you still have some room for extra DPS. If you go up to the last level of officer gear, you cannot fit, of course, C types on this one, because this is reserved for Omega clones only. As you can see already, I got a hefty 60 DPS per unit, meaning close to 240 a base DPS on the lasers only. Thermal and EM as damage profile, so they will be very efficient against shield, a bit less so against armor. What is to be noted is the optimal range. You see here that I'm, in conjunction of course with the tracking computer, able to reach an optimal range of 26 plus 10 in accuracy fall off. So my orbit range natively will be in between 30 to 35 kilometers, and with that I can outrange most of the ships in T6 and TL7 encounters. That will be very easy, and so the ship will sustain very minimal and marginal damage during the encounters. What you need to pay attention to, however, is the tracking speed, because it is of course much lower than what you would get with the pulse lasers, and you need to be wary of fast moving target. And that is the natural transition for the mid-slot rigs, where naturally I went for a warp scrambler just to take care of MWD equipped rats, so that I can slow them down to something which is manageable in terms of speed and orbital and angular velocity for my beam lasers, and that is coupled with a stasis webifier. So whenever I have a ship with afterburner, then the stasis webifier will take care of it, and if I get something on MWD, then both units will function in conjunction and put the ship back to an angular velocity that my beam laser will be able to manage. So those two for me are quite important. They are not necessarily used every time. It's just a matter of circumstances, whenever something just fly by and you don't have time to kill it before it reach like these 10-12 kilometers, where your beam laser will become a bit less efficient. In terms of drones, I went for something which kind of complements the main high slot weapon. So main is foreseen against shield, so I took something which is efficient against armor. The idea behind it being that basically when the target reached that 10-15 kilometers, the drone will take up and the rat should already be on armor or hull. And so I took the Valkyrie because it's explosive damage and it's the most efficient one in terms of armor management, because for hull you get the same protection across the board, so it doesn't really matter. But the drone, basically, as you will be orbiting around 30 to 35, will not see much action because the effective range is 25 kilometers. So you see that you have about 240, which will be your base DPS, and that 30-ish DPS of the drone, which will be more circumstantial depending on your target. Now coming to the low slot, what you see here is basically what I consider the standard loadout for a ship, and then you can have two slots that you can arrange at leisure to make the ship more tanky or more DPS wise. So what do we have is, of course, the tracking computers, and you have seen already the impact on the base range and the accuracy fall off, meaning that this is the piece of hardware that helps you get that extra range that put you into a safety zone when you will be orbiting and firing at your target. When you activate it, it will grant you a range of about 50 kilometers, which is very nice, especially if you combine it with your basic heatsink, which give you a bit of extra damage, but also when activated reduce the firing or increase, sorry, the firing rate of your lasers. Okay, it reduce the activation time, so increase the firing rate. So you activate the tracking computer, the heatsink, and then the lasers, and means that you can get 2 to 3 shots out of your lasers at more or less a 50 kilometers range, meaning that you can take out frigates out of those 2 to 3 shots and severely damage destroyers. Most of the time you will not be able to kill them, but they should be either in hull or very low armor, which is very nice, because then when they reach the 35 kilometer landmark, you just have to finish them off with 1, maybe 2 cycles at most. And so that's why I said that the Webifier and the Scrambler are more of a last resort option in a way, because normally you should be able, with the tracking computer and heatsink combo, to actually destroy those fast moving targets because they reach you. Third mandatory items is some form of repair option. So here I went for the armor repair. You could put a shield as well. That won't be something that I would be shocked at, even though the ship is naturally designed for armor tanking, especially with this additional natural resistance. But you could put a shield booster or an armor repair. That would be the same, because as you will be range kiting, you won't sustain much damage. Myself being in a Mars base and facing mostly laser ship, that's when I went with the armor repair, because it will be much more efficient to run on armor, which has a much more natural resistance to EM and thermal damage than the shield does. And so that's why I went for the armor repair. So question that remains is what to do with the 2 optional slots. So as you can see from the capacitor, you are not quite capacitor stable. You still have a hefty 25-26 minutes of combat time, but for the safety of it personally, I do prefer putting in a battery, and that battery will just bring me to capacitor stability. So that's one option that you can play with. You could put some speed booster, an afterburner, or a microwave drive. Just be wary that that will reduce further your capacitor management. I'm not expecting that you need them, because with the base speed, as you can see here, of over 300 meters per second, you should be able to maintain a correct orbit around your target. I never had a sense to need additional speed booster for that chip, except for the very fast moving target, but for those anyway you would not be able to outpace them. So this is basically no use until or unless you want some comfort when you mop up your loot after the encounter is done. But for me, the battery is still something that I do favor, especially if you need sort of in emergency situation to get a bit more juice if you're drained or something else. It might prove quite useful to have that extra in. For the last slot, you can go either a bit more tanky and go for an armor hardener. So you can get here an adaptive armor hardener will increase even further your armor resistance. Of course, if you go for the shield, you could put a shield hardener that would be the same, and that would be, I would say, the more tankier build that you will have. And I have a combat demonstration of that one, and you will see the difference in between the more tanky version versus the more a DPS oriented version. And the DPS oriented version, of course, will get you with another heatsink, and you see your base DPS goes from a bit below 240 to 250, so you gain like 10 DPS cores. But what is interesting is then that you have 2 cycles in terms of activating your heatsink, so you will be able to get a hot DPS much more longer than what you would have with a single one. So the overall damage output is slightly better, and that is the second build that you will see in the combat demonstration that I have for you at the end of the video. And you will see that overall for TL6 encounters I gain like 2.5 minutes shorter encounter time, so the difference is not really really significant. Now if you want to go something a bit very atypical, you could replace the second heatsink with a shield booster, and so you get a combo armor and shield repair, which is very interesting. And in my initial day, actually I ran a small shield booster and an armor repper, the small shield booster being more than enough to actually repair the shield in most encounters, except when I was running against a Mars ship, because they are natural shield killers, and then I would get the armor repper in there just to repair. But having the shield booster can help you get your armor repair. So you get into armor, you activate the shield repair and the armor repairs. The shield will get you some buffer while the armor repair gets your armor back into full shape. That's an option, sort of an hybrid option in between the shield tank or the armor tank version of stuff. But it was quite effective when I used it in the past. Now I'm more comfy using the armor side of things. I'm more of an armor tank guy and pilot, so that's why you see the configuration I have here. In terms of internal rig, so I went with a fairly standard for the laser DPS, so you get a collision accelerator, flat 15% damage increase, and then a burst aeratus, which give you the activation time decrease, so improving your rate of fire. I know that some people tend to prefer to activation time reduction because it increases a bit more your DPS. That can be true. Difference would be certainly marginal in this build, but that will have a more significant impact on your capacitor, and that's what I wanted to avoid. So that's when I went for the one of each, basically. In terms of the engineering rigs, of course, I went for something to help manage capacitor, so a control circuit which will give me an improved recharge time, and of course a semiconductor memory cell just to improve the overall capacitor in itself. Being a bit more larger give you more room, being larger also improve basically your recharge rates because it is a percentage of your overall capacitor. So this is why the combination of both is quite interesting. That's it for the build. So if you like the content, please do so and hit the like button. If you find this information useful, you can subscribe to the channel and get notified of every new video I make. I try to do like 2 a week over the weekend at the moment, but I may change that over time. So thank you again, fly safe, and see you in our next video.